The value altering and behavior altering effects of a motivating operation occur at the same time, but they are considered independent. One effect does not cause the other. Food deprivation, for example, increases the current frequency of behaviors that have previously produced food even before any food is obtained. At the same time, it increases the reinforcing effectiveness of food itself. After food is contacted, food seeking behavior may increase further, but this does not mean that the behavior altering effect depends on the value altering effect. Instead, both effects are produced by the same motivating operation. Once reinforcement occurs, however, these effects can be difficult to separate analytically. The strength of the motivating operation appears related to how strongly it directly evokes behavior. Importantly, these effects do not depend on an individual's awareness of reinforcement or motivation. Behavior is influenced by motivating operations regardless of whether the person can describe or identify these relations. Motivating operations can influence behavior both directly and indirectly. The direct effect refers to the immediate evocative or abative influence on behavior. When deprivation is strong, behaviors may occur in situations that differ from those in which reinforcement has previously been obtained. As deprivation increases, the range of stimuli that evoke responding can broaden. In this sense, motivating operations can evoke behavior even when relevant discriminative stimuli are weak or absent. Motivating operations also have indirect effects. They alter the evocative or abative strength of discriminative stimuli that have been correlated with reinforcement. For example, when deprivation is high, stimuli associated with reinforcement become more effective in evoking behavior. In addition, motivating operations indirectly alter the reinforcing effectiveness of conditioned stimuli that have been paired with primary reinforcers. These indirect effects highlight how motivating operations interact with other antecedent variables to influence behavior. A complete analysis of motivating operations requires considering how value altering and behavior altering effects operate together across direct and indirect pathways. A motivating operation can directly establish the effectiveness of a reinforcer while simultaneously evoking behavior that has produced that reinforcer. At the same time, it can indirectly enhance the effectiveness of conditioned stimuli associated with that reinforcer and increase the evocative strength of discriminative stimuli correlated with reinforcement availability. These effects do not occur in isolation. Instead, they work together to influence behavior in complex environments. The motivating operation sets the stage by altering what matters at the moment, while discriminative stimuli signal where or when reinforcement is available. Understanding this interaction clarifies why behavior may occur more readily in some contexts than others, even when reinforcement contingencies remain constant. This integrated view emphasizes the central role of motivating operations in operant behavior. Motivating operations and discriminative stimuli are antecedent variables that alter the current frequency of behavior, but they do not change the organism's behavioral repertoire. These effects are described as behavior altering. Antecedent manipulations can evoke or abate behavior temporarily, but they do not produce lasting change by themselves. In contrast, consequences have function altering effects. Reinforcement, punishment, extinction, and recovery procedures change the future probability of behavior by altering the functional relations between responses and consequences. For example, removing a difficult task may reduce problem behavior in the moment, but it does not teach new responses. If alternative behaviors are reinforced, the individual's repertoire changes, allowing different behavior to occur under similar conditions in the future. Distinguishing between behavior altering and function altering effects is critical for understanding why antecedent strategies alone produce temporary effects, whereas consequence based interventions can lead to lasting behavior change. Reducing or eliminating a motivating operation can temporarily decrease problem behavior, but this approach does not produce permanent change. When the motivating operation returns, the behavior is likely to reoccur. Antecedent interventions can therefore be useful for immediate management, but they should not be mistaken for complete solutions. Despite this limitation, modifying motivating operations may be necessary, particularly when environments are highly aversive or socially impoverished. Such conditions can contribute to the development and persistence of problem behavior and negatively affect quality of life. Improving environmental conditions can reduce current problem behavior and help prevent future occurrences. But lasting change requires altering functional relations through enforcement of appropriate behavior. Recognizing the temporary nature of antecedent manipulations helps clarify their role within comprehensive intervention strategies and prevents over reliance on short term solutions. Motivating operations and discriminative stimuli are both antecedent variables that alter the current frequency of behavior, but they do so through different relations with consequences. A discriminative stimulus affects behavior because it has been correlated with differential availability of reinforcement. In its presence, reinforcement has been available. In its absence, reinforcement has not. A motivating operation, by contrast, affects behavior by altering the effectiveness of a reinforcer. When the motivating operation is present, the consequence is effective. When it is absent, the consequence loses its effectiveness. Behavior decreases under those conditions, not because reinforcement is unavailable, but because it is no longer valuable. This distinction is critical. A stimulus may be present and reinforcement may be available, yet behavior will not occur if the relevant motivating operation is absent. Understanding this difference clarifies why changes in behavior sometimes reflect shifts in motivation rather than changes in reinforcement availability. Painful stimulation illustrates why some antecedent events are better classified as motivating operations rather than discriminative stimuli. For a stimulus to function as a discriminative stimulus, reinforcement must be effective in both its presence and absence, differing only in availability. Pain reduction does not meet this requirement. In the absence of pain, pain reduction cannot function as a reinforcer because there is nothing to reduce. When behavior decreases without pain, this is not due to extinction, but due to the absence of an effective reinforcer. Painful stimulation therefore alters both the effectiveness of pain reduction as a reinforcer and the frequency of behaviors that have produced pain reduction in the past. These effects define a motivating operation. Classifying painful stimulation as an MO avoids confusion between reinforcer availability and reinforcer effectiveness and maintains a functional interpretation of behavior. An itch provides another example of an antecedent event that functions as a motivating operation rather than a discriminative stimulus. Although scratching can remove an itch, this does not mean the itch signals the availability of reinforcement. In the absence of an itch, removal of the itch cannot function as a reinforcer, even if scratching is possible. The itch, therefore, does not meet the criteria for a discriminative stimulus. Instead, the itch establishes its own removal as an effective reinforcer and evokes behavior that has produced that outcome in the past. Scratching occurs because the removal of the itch is valuable at that moment. This analysis highlights how many aversive stimuli that appear to trigger behavior do so by altering motivation rather than signaling reinforcement availability. Viewing these events as motivating operations preserves a functional account of behavior. The headache example further clarifies the distinction between motivating operations and discriminative stimuli. When a headache is present, pain reduction becomes an effective reinforcer, and behaviors that have produced pain relief are evoked. Locations associated with obtaining relief may function as discriminative stimuli depending on whether pain relief has been available there in the past. In absence of a headache, those same locations may still contain aspirin, but aspirin no longer functions as a reinforcer. Under those conditions, behavior does not decrease due to extinction, but because there is no motivation to reduce pain. The headache alters the effectiveness of pain reduction and evokes relevant behavior, while other stimuli may signal where relief can be obtained. This example shows how motivating operations and discriminative stimuli work together while remaining functionally distinct. In applied settings, instructions can function as motivating operations under certain conditions. When an instruction is associated with difficult tasks, it may require aversive properties through its correlation with those tasks. In such cases, the instruction can establish its own removal as a reinforcer and evoke avoidance or escape behavior. The instruction alters motivation by increasing the value of task termination. In contrast, if task completion in the presence of the instruction has consistently produced reinforcements such as praise, the instruction may function as a discriminative stimulus instead. Whether an instruction functions as an MO or an SD depends on its relation to reinforcement, effectiveness, or availability. This distinction has important implications for assessment and intervention, as misclassifying the function of instructions can lead to ineffective or counterproductive strategies.